it really amplifies the importance to have a space to have these type of discussions around very sensitive and polarized topics that impact many of us. My name is April De Simone. I am a recent graduate from the Design and Urban Ecologies program at the Parsons School for Design. A lot of my research focused on the deep systemic and entangled challenges we all were exposed to here in the documentary. Some of my research was focused on Community District 1, as well as Community District 6, where I'm from, here in the Bronx. In addition to looking at these challenges, a question arose around who are the influencers who really perpetuate these systemic conditions that many people and communities are facing. And what we would like to do here tonight is really not only talk about issues that we may be facing, but how we can begin to strategize to move forward, to build more inclusive and just communities that will benefit all of us, not some of us. Thank you. So I'd like to take a few minutes to have everyone have an opportunity to just introduce themselves.
My name is Ed Garcia, lifelong resident of the neighborhood and the Bronx. I started documenting the changes in the neighborhood in my block called Melrose about a little over 5 years ago, and now I continue to do it borough-wide on Welcome to the Bronx. I'm an activist in the community. I try to get as many people involved when issues arise on city planning, and I'm just glad to be here and part of this panel to listen to what you guys have to say, because this is more importantly about you as a community coming here to, not just listen to us speak, but to engage you all.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Winn. I am Chief Operating Officer for a community organization right around the corner here on Melrose called Nos Quedamos. Nos Quedamos has been part of this community's work and transformation since 1993, when our illustrious founder, Yolanda Garcia, founded this organization during the dark days of the Bronx, when something similar that we've just been seeing these stories play out, when the city was thinking about what they were going to do here. And she was one of those communities, a small business owner, who put together a coalition of residents, community residents, business owners, developers, new up-and-coming architects and the like, to build what was then called the Melrose Commons Redevelopment Plan. If you look at all these orange and orange-yellow buildings that sort of line from Melrose from about 149th to 161st, from Cortlandt down to 3rd Avenue, you'll see the remnants or the product of Nos Quedamos' work. It created 4,000 affordable housing units mixed for seniors and working families and poor families, 1 million square feet of commercial real estate, and 400 new homeowners, co-ops and townhomes that you see in the neighborhood. So we're here because this is an important conversation for us. Our conversation continues to be, how do we protect this affordability, and how do we prevent the coming of what could quite possibly be the last frontier for gentrification. So I look forward to having this conversation further.
I'm Kelly Anderson, and I was the director of the film I am the director of the film that you just saw. I made it with a friend of mine and a partner, Allison Dean, who was an urban planner at Hunter College, and we started that film 8 years ago now. It took 6 years, and it's been screening a lot all over the world, actually. And one of the reasons we made it is that, it's too late to reverse the downtown Brooklyn rezoning, but, there's lots of other parts of the city and the world where the knowledge of what happened there might be useful. So that's my hope. So thanks for inviting me.
Good evening. I'm Michael Partis. I'm a professor at City University, Burroughs Lamar College. Born and raised in the Bronx, from United Bronx Parents, if any of you are familiar with it, all the way to Fordham University. And in that kind of way, so I'm also a researcher at the Bronx African American History Project. And so Craig Wilder actually comes from Fordham University History Department, and I'm out of that tradition as well. A lot of my work has been on public housing and thinking about really, we're under attack, right? Public housing is absolutely under attack in a number of ways that we'll probably talk about tonight. But mainly what I'm thinking about is how to prevent that. And secondly, I do a lot of work with Black and Latino men working around, mentorship, around conflict resolution, and really under the guise of access to higher education, we're talking about a holistic social development approach. So I've been here and I'm really thinking about these type of issues, and Ashe and Free the Land. For those of you that down that know.
Just a quick reminder, we're live streaming, and also please tweet, Facebook, use social media to get the word out that this is taking place here.
What's the hashtag?
BX Gentrification.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As we saw from the film, gentrification is like a big boogeyman with a lot of tentacles that can really cover a wide range of social economic issues. Given your respective perspectives, whether it's the Bronx or Brooklyn or wherever else, how would you give a context to what gentrification means in relation to your space?
Well, in relation to my space in the neighborhood and in the South Bronx, gentrification to me right now, it's basically it's more the conversation that's happening, more seeing developers coming in, purchasing, making big speculative purchases. In a matter of a week, a couple of months ago, 2 buildings were purchased at the foot of the 3rd Avenue Bridge. One was a loft building that sold for $31 million, and then a week later, the building across from it, just a single-story building on the waterfront, sold for $31 million. And then this week, we just found out that the lot next door was sold to the same developer. And this was a developer that we were told that he usually sits on property, but Cranes New York just reported that he has intentions of building up to 6 buildings. He can build, because it was rezoned, he can build 25-story buildings, and we're talking about half of them rental, and then the other half condominium is what they're intending to build there. So little things like that, not little things, but things like that is what's making gentrification real in our neighborhood, and also the displacements of smaller mom and pop shops. 3rd Avenue, the Hub, for example. After the decline that happened in the 70s and 80s, a lot of the immigrant families that moved into the neighborhood made the Hub what it is, what you see today. And now you're starting to see a rise in rents. There was one particular store, Beverly Boutique, which was just it was a jewelry store that was there for several decades, and the rent went up so much. Now it's home to Orvis Shoes, which was an Upper East Side shoe store, and it was split into also Carter's Children. And this is right in front of Youngland, who's been here for about 40 years, a children's department store that. So they're encroaching on our space, in retail as well. So that to me is how I see it.
So we sit as an actual developer, having a history of development in the Melrose community. And our challenge with this is, a lot of the work that we did 15 years ago were covered in these special tax abated that made it viable for for-profits to partner with us. Where we are now is a lot of those windows are closing now. We're approaching 12, 13, and 14 years on some of our projects. So our main thrust in the gentrification argument is how do we maintain these buildings as permanently affordable for working class families? How do we restructure ourselves as an organization? How do we make the right relationships with other nonprofit developers to create a space where when these windows close, we're in a position to exercise our right to own outright, and in a lot of cases that's a hard deal for organizations like ours. We're not sitting on tens of millions of dollars on balance sheets and the like. What we bring in terms of revenue goes right back out into the community in terms of services and programs. Folks come through our doors for everything from reading a letter to interacting with every possible level of government for whatever reason. And this is what we do with the resources that come in. Developer fees is the money term that developers receive when they're in these sort of special packages. So for Nos Quedamos, we spend our developer fees providing services, doing marquee programs, giving out resources, everything from tax services to entitlement, support. So the idea for us is how do we take that kind of organization and position it to be full outright owners of assets at tens and 20 millions of dollars. So the challenge for us, to your question, is maintaining community-based nonprofit ownership for housing to remain affordable. That's where we rest in the conversation.
Can you repeat the question?
Certainly. Your film reflects how complicated and large gentrification is, and how it encompasses a lot of different socioeconomic issues. In doing your film or experiencing what you experienced, what are some of, to contextualize it, what did gentrification mean to you?
Well, I think one of the reasons we made the film is that we felt that the whole public dialogue and debate about gentrification was kind of not very productive, and just people kind of just either like, I'm not going to feel guilty about where I live, or, you shouldn't move here, and just like all the stuff that was very much around people's individual decisions about where to live. And so I guess for me, in the end, there's lots of... I guess we wanted to intervene in this idea, too, that, like, well, the city always changes, and it's always changed, and it always will change, and that's sort of, like, basically the way that people would talk about it. And if you go onto, like, these blogs, I mean, anytime there's anything about gentrification, there's just, like, hundreds and hundreds of comments, and they're all pretty stupid, I have to say. Like, people are not really informed about, the deeper questions, So I guess for me, I always just fall back on Craig Wilder, who's in the film, his thing about, gentrification isn't about people making an individual decision about moving in or out of a neighborhood. I mean, people are going to go where they can afford the housing, and basically that's it. There's a freedom of people moving around, but, we really need to look at this more from the policy questions and look at it as for me, gentrification is basically corporations reshaping cities to make lots of money, and government allowing that to happen. And, I think it's really important to distinguish it from a kind of more organic kind of reinvestment that can happen in a community. So I guess I'll just stop there. Except I will also say that I do think it's important for people who are gentrifying a neighborhood to really understand the dynamics of what they're part of, and not just arrive there and be like, great, I live here now, I should, reshape this neighborhood to meet my needs, and, who cares about the people who've been here all along. So I think, like, just better communication between newcomers and people who already live in neighborhoods. And, somebody was passing around this flyer for the Crown Heights Tenants Union group. This is an amazing example from Brooklyn of gentrifiers and people who have been in the community a long time united in a tenants organization that are really tackling policy issues. I mean, they recently got their community board to go back and reverse a rezoning decision, that had already been done, and it's just through sheer, these people are amazing, and they're doing a lot of work to, because there are people who move into neighborhoods who aren't from there, who want to be in a diverse, sustainable, nice, good neighborhood that's not a bunch of luxury condos and, people who've lived there for 2 years. So, anyway, I'll leave it there.
A few things. There's a deep political crisis, right? And I say political crisis in that with these large-scale changes happening, there can't be any no-contest elections, right? There can't be candidates just uncontested running, right? Secondly, there can't be a lack of an urban agenda, right? We can't be not addressed, and we can't have the lack of political pressure to make sure that things are addressed. And if that's going to be the case, then maybe we need to flood all of these offices, from every board to every community level, to every state, to every assembly, to every chamber. That's number one. Number two, the historical components given, like my background, really interest me, right? And that families, right, and people who have been deemed to have the least value are then deemed to have the least options, right? And they can easily be, or not as easily be, right, because we come from peoples of resistance, right? But they can be forced to move, they can be forced to leave, they can be forced to exit, they can be forced to migrate, they can be forced to immigrate, right? And what does that do with the continual history of particular groups always having to move and relocate and shift, right? The lesson is the endurance. The incredible things that low-income people, that working-class people, that blue-collar people, that people of African descent, or people who are committed to justice, right? The incredible lesson is how we resist from this to everything else that we see. But yet and still, right, that we in a society where a lot of the political conversation among elites is that this is okay, right? Robert Moses can move people because they're deemed to be less valuable, right? We can't, and to continue the language of it, right? We saw Mindy full of reference in her book, Root Shock, right? But she also talks about that language in the 70s of benign neglect, right? That language of planned shrinkage, which is really a language of go away, leave them alone, never come back, don't call, if they call 911, don't respond to them, right? If they have a fire, let it burn. To now the language of gentrification. You guys should come. A particular group should come. You should show up. You should be here. Well, what kind of candy do you need to come? Whatever you need, you'll get, right? And to continue, what does that mean? Families moved. People moved. Historical memory, institutional memory attempted to be erased. And we can't be erased, right? And lastly, just thinking about what does this mean for local people in terms of we're not seen to be owners of anything. Right? One of the main issues we're looking at these evictions, we're looking at people being forced out, right, is who owns what? Right? And this is when we see this idea of rent, we see this idea of, the sheriffs and the marshals going to come to evict you, but who owns what? Right? And where's the investment that the people of here, from here, committed to here, should be the ones to own. And they should be the ones to set price. There's not an invisible hand doing it. It's not an invisible hand doing it. It's not a nameless person doing it. It's being done intentionally, right? So we got to talk about this ownership thing. We got to talk about this ownership part. We got to know our history and remember this and use it as a springboard to move forward. And last but not least, we can't be moved, right? And so we have to think about how historically groups we've been interested in are forced to move. And this is what Craig talks a lot about.
Right.
We can't let that trend to continue.
Right. The one thing that jumped out was, again, these entities that are not under any accountability of the people, like the New York Economic Development Corporation, making decisions. Or on the other hand, sometimes you have small not-for-profit, Anthony, developers, I don't mean you, that sort of captivate or capture, they say, the voice of the community, that this is what the community wants, that these cries about displacement are over-exaggerated and that's not necessarily going to come to fruition. The spaces we're building on are vacant, nobody's there. But often what's left out of that dialogue is, again, the historical context of urban renewal meeting urban removal and the continuation of the collateral effects into the community of a speculative real estate market. How do you speak to the ability of people to begin holding elected officials who make these decisions and have these narratives accountable for their actions?
Yeah, sure. Context and history is everything. At the time that Nostradamus started its work in the Melrose Commons area, this was the dark, war zone days of the Bronx. It's coming out of the late 80s when she started the work, and they began putting the shovels in the ground around 1993. What they told her at the time was, what do you mean you're going to sell houses in that community? Nobody's going to buy there. What do you mean you want to build 1 million square feet of commercial real estate? No businesses are going to want to come to this community. So the idea, to your point, was they refused to accept what the city was coming here with. And they organized politically. They organized community. They organized and threatened every elected official that touched this community that said, look, if you're not behind this, then we're going to have a problem. That's the same mode that we need to be operating in. Now, here's our challenge as an organization. When we create 4,000 new spaces and you have pretty much a whole new neighborhood form of folks that don't have a historical connection to the neighborhood, don't have that sense of, where we've been and how we've come, they're still contemplating food, clothing, and shelter for their children and their families. And for me to try to tell them, I need you to come out now and get engaged on this political issue or this activism issue or this, that, or the third, come on, let's be clear. She's been working since 12 hours and now I want them to come and sit in a community meeting. That's the challenge in terms of how do we keep the mobilization, the attention, the agitation alive. For us, it's through engagement, through service, i.e. we will help you, and now we demand that you come and help yourself, i.e. this community. So it's and I can only speak for us and the partners that we work with, because we work with organizations that are consistent in this philosophy. But sure, we go to the community board meetings and hear about this one and the next one. They're looking here, they're looking there, they're looking there, they're looking there. So my rally cry is engage, 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 engage. Don't wait till it's too late. I mean, we actually have the benefit of being in this position for 20 years as an organization, so there's some credibility that we have. But if the community is not there, if the community is not allowed or alive and loud about this issue, guess what? By the time we look up, the deal has already been inked and the land has already been transferred, and then we're asking what happened. So it's about engagement and activity.
Yeah, I also feel like politically, I mean, we really, really need to make a lot of noise once we engage and we figure out what we want. Because, okay, de Blasio, he basically, the woman who's in the film who is from the Brooklyn City Planning, Purnima Kapoor, she got promoted under de Blasio. She's now the executive director of New York City Planning in general. Okay? The person who's head of city planning under de Blasio is the guy who ran the Times Square bid and redeveloped Times Square. And EDC is basically unchanged, Economic Development Corporation, from who it was under Bloomberg. So I believe that we have more of an opening politically, but if we don't make a lot of noise, it's really not going to happen. I mean, and to me, that's really important, because I feel like de Blasio maybe he's trying to make his name on other issues, but real estate, I just don't think he's willing to take these people on, or he's really trying to convince them that he's not going to take them on. So that's huge. And I feel like, all of these public hearings that people show up to are total crap, really. But I do feel like direct action, like if we go back and look at like the people who did stop Robert Moses from putting a highway through Greenwich Village, it's by sitting in city government and not moving and getting arrested one after the other after the other after the other until it was just too much noise for them to ignore. I really feel like that's really important, because I think de Blasio, unless he knows that there's a huge amount of community pressure, he's not really going to do anything differently. I also think we have to be really suspicious of these arguments that these public-private partnerships are very problematical, because they basically do the work of the private sector and they suck all the money out of the public sector. And this whole idea that we can't do anything in the city without like bringing in private money to do it. I understand we're between a rock and a hard place. There's not, nobody wants to raise taxes, and we don't have the federal government coming in with any kind of, big investment in cities. But I feel like we really need to be very suspicious of these public-private organizations.
Because they're stacked against the public partner. They're stacked against
by definition,
the public partner.
Yeah.
So it's the private that ends up walking away with all the goodies in the end. And for whatever time period we had of abatements and breaks, so to speak, that allows for subsidized housing and the prices to be held down, once that time period is gone, and that public partner, whether it be a CBO or NYCHA, if they're not in a position to really take full-fledged ownership of it, it goes private, and then it's no longer in the category of what we would even consider close to affordable.
And on the topics of politics, we have to really rally and organize our people in the Bronx, because voter apathy right now, it's at a disgusting level. The last election, Ruben Diaz Jr., our borough president, was elected by less than 20% voter turnout, and that's not a mandate. That's not a voice. He can't speak for the borough because only less than 20% voted for him. And we have to hold our politicians accountable, because words are very harmful. And he's been on a campaign of rebranding our borough, calling it the New Bronx, at every chance he gets. It's the New Bronx. This is what we're doing in the New Bronx. And what was the end result of that? Last year was, I've been in real estate for over 15 years as an appraiser. the result is that I kept reading at least once a week an article talking about the Bronx as the next frontier. Why? Because our elected officials are being given a free rein, a microphone, to a pulpit basically to push their agenda. And it's not to benefit our people, it's to attract new people, because even in his own words, he's said this. So we really have to rally our citizens, and we have to get rid of that voter apathy. We have politicians who hand out turkeys on Christmas and Thanksgiving, and everybody's happy. We have to end that. We have to start educating our people, and really just, like you said, applying pressure, and then just sitting there until you get arrested. Like, we have to bring back those days where people actually cared and caused the ruckus. With our elected officials.
And just when they do the right thing, it's particularly in the city council, like really show them love. Like my city council person, Carlos Menchaca in Sunset Park, just did a great thing, not letting EDC take over a project. And he got so much pressure, negative pressure on him from the mayor and from everybody, in the EDC. So, it was kind of important that we were all like, yes, we're behind you, we have your back, we'll re-elect you,
Kelly, can you just expand upon that the council member does have the power to reject proposals or things coming into their backyard? Because sometimes it seems like that's not an option. So
I don't really know the specific details about that, but as far as rezonings go, they can't, but there's a practice in the city council of they tend to go with whoever's district it is. So one of the reasons the downtown Brooklyn rezoning happened was because the council person there was for it. So everybody on the council just looks and says, well, what do you want? It's your district, and if they're going to vote for it, then they do. So that's why it is. And we do have a progressive caucus on the city council now, and it's really, really important. Like, at the time, under Bloomberg, there wasn't, and now we do have this emergent, more progressive voice that is trying to do better stuff. So we need to let them know.
Michael, your thoughts on accountability and representation from elected officials and possible approaches?
Somebody in this room needs to run for borough president. Somebody in this room needs to take Ruben Diaz Sr.'s position. Somebody in this room needs to be on the board of elections. Somebody in this room, who might be already in this room, but needs to flood these community boards. I think the accountability issue is highly important for those that are there. But my issue is that many of those who are there have proven through their actions they don't deserve to be there. And you can take that as a polemical statement by me, but so be it, right? They've proven that they don't belong there, mostly because what they're willing to compromise in a war of position hurts me too much. It could be me, it could be a part of me, but I'm not here to preserve part of me. I'm here to preserve all of me. And so in that way, I do think that they need to be held accountable, and a lot of that is with the direct pressure. I also understand what we're talking about. Many working people are under an enormous amount of pressure in terms of hours, distance between work, right? Distance between work and babysitters and food and et cetera, right? So there's an enormous amount of social distance and an enormous amount of time expended just surviving. And in that way, the people who have the time to be in this room right now doing this, our responsibility is to keep that pressure on, to not say that it's paternalistic, right? To support it, to advocate it, to be on the side of those that we represent in the communities and the people that we're interested in, right? We want to draw as much participation as possible. But if we really know the reality of it, if we know that the babysitter is in the babysitter is in Bedford Park, but the job is all the way in the Lower East Side, but, we got to go to the supermarket, we got to do this. And we know that's the reality. So many people are oppressed in that. Those of us in this work, those of us that can find some way to finagle that time, we got to be on the forefront. And we are, right? Living wage, whatever it is, we prove that we're on the forefront, but, we can't get tired, right? And I also think that the radical imagination that we have has to be about not just maintaining and staying, but, we have to have seizure, right? They're literally seizing. Gentrification is a logic of seizing a community, right? Taking, right? This is mine. I'm going to convince you that this is mine. So we have to have a logic of, well, instead of you taking, maybe I'm going to take first. Perhaps this has to be, we're going to take all type of politics, we're going to take all type of strategy, and inclusiveness is good, but inclusiveness always seems to be my folks is left out. So now my inclusive conversation needs to be an inclusive, I'm going to cut this off really quick, right? But my inclusive conversation needs to be a controlled conversation. I want my inclusion in control. One way or another. And that needs to be how we hold them accountable. I don't think we can wait anymore. I guess that's my thing. I don't think people are waiting, and I think our one leg that's moving with protest, with direct demonstration, with everything that we're doing, we got to keep that going. But our other leg to say, I'm taking this position, and I'm going to be here again and again and again and again, but I'm taking this position.
And Michael, what you resonate, we're going to just wrap it up because we want to open the floor to Q&A. But what you resonate is, for example, out in Oakland, California,
right,
there's something called the People's Market. And over here, it always seems to be a gauge that if Whole Foods decides to want to come into your neighborhood, that's such a big success and we've reached a milestone. But you look at places like Oakland, California, and it was a food desert. And people got tired of having that same narrative surround them. So it was a cross-collaborative effort amongst different nationalities with different backgrounds where they came together and used an instrument called a direct public offering to sell shares of stock to the community so that they can pay to open this supermarket in this community that is community-owned that can rival what places like Whole Foods claims to bring into the community. They raised $1.5 million, and then they were matched by an impact investment firm looking to do social good in communities for an additional $1.5 million, and they will be breaking ground soon. And all the things, whether it's a communal kitchen, health classes, what have you, is going to be housed in this space and is as an example that you don't need corporate interests solely to bring change and meet needs within the community. So moving forward, and in summation, what are some final thoughts that people, actions that we can take locally to begin mobilizing on that level to see things change or divert from where we're currently at?
Come on around the corner to Nostradamus. I mean that because where we sit now is our building phase of the work is done. Like I said, 18 buildings, and I gave you the stats. But where we are now is how do we re-engage this new community? Because a lot of the folks that moved into those 4,000 units came from different places from around the city, around the country, around the world. So they are very new residents in our sort of cohort of residences. So one, you got to rebuild the community again. You got to sit down again, and we have to talk to each other again. And we have to rethink what the future of this community looked like. If you come over, I can show you the drawings that the community made. When they sat down and they said, we want this neighborhood to look like this, like this, like this. We want gardens. 18 of them sit right here in the Melrose Commons footprint. We're trying to organize those gardens to realize a vision of really raising the level of what we can provide for families here as far as produce and a farmer's market and those kind of things. So we're in the process now. This is not planned. This is actually happening. We're sitting down. We're trying to get these gardens together and talk about what their infrastructure can provide based on the fact that they are here. We're delivering healthy eating classes and parenting classes, sometimes at the gardens where folks are walking by and really being able to just stop by and engage. So I'm telling you to come over to Nostradamus because we need you back at the table. We don't know. We don't know. We have a history, but we're trying to plan for a new future. Same mission, new vision. Because when we started, we were talking about building on empty lots and burned down buildings. Well, we succeeded in that. Now the question is, how do we protect it? And you must. All of your neighbors that you know in this community, they must engage. And that's the space that we try to provide there now. And that's how we plan to see the future is brighter and still we're staying viable.
I really don't know what you should do in this community. I mean, I just think getting together and talking and participating and doing that work and maybe making it work for people who have kids and who are working lots of jobs. And, it sounds like you're trying to do that, and that's good, so that you can come and there's somewhere to leave your kid while you participate in this conversation, right? But, yeah, I mean, just that map that I made about downtown Brooklyn and who came up with the plan, I think you got to make that for yourself. And, by the way, we have a study guide coming out really soon. And anybody who wants to give me their address, I'll send it to you, your email address, because it has a lot of visioning stuff and information. And But, just making that map for yourself of where the power is in your community and what's coming down the pipe and how to impact it. And
we like to say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Okay? So get at the table, y'all. Get at the table.
Ed, Michael, any?
I think number one, support the efforts that are existing. Right, this is an easy one. Waco's developing affordable housing. $5 donation if that's what it is. Right, tweet. Facebook, show love to them. Show love to new settlement houses. Show love to Fort and Bedford. Second thing, right? Look at our historical narrative. How we built housing before, how we seized it, how we kind of did it with those nonprofits, with those kind of hybrid organizations. We need a lot more of those. Not only to provide the direct services, but to say we want to own the land. Right? One of the things is that Koch had to concede that, not give that. Right? He had to concede that with the force. And we need to continue that force. That's one. Number two, worker-owned cooperatives. Let's have that kind of conversation. Right? Let's talk about, the brother from MIT, Yorman Nunez. Right? Let's support that. We need to have an idea of our economic development, our business development are going to be worker-owned cooperatives. So then when we say we want the people of this community to own businesses, to have jobs, they come together, right? Support other efforts like the Black Light Project, like Tanya Fields is doing. Support these nonprofit organizations, right? We got to develop that infrastructure of information of what is happening or what is working. If it's a little $5, if it's a continue tweeting them, if it's a continue spreading the word about that, that's number one. Replication of what is working, along with the conversation about building something new. The last other thing, this is what I do with my students. Because at the core, I am an educator, right? And so I turn the conversation about when I ask them, what you want to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? Right? Quote unquote. They're grown, right? But what do you want to be when you grow up? And I love the answers I hear, right? Because I hear social worker, counselor, teacher, police officer, fire person, EMT, x-ray technician, things like that, right? And it all speaks to what? An ethos of service, right? I want to do something for people. I want to do something for communities. I keep that part, and I have another conversation about, let's talk about nanotech. Right, let's talk about wearables. Let's talk about computer programming. Let's talk about app development. Let's talk about worker-owned cooperatives. Let's talk about another set of things that's going to bring capital, that's going to own capital, that's going to be a part of the recyclical process of bringing money, of bringing income, of bringing ownership, of changing the finance of these communities. Let's have that conversation, right? And whatever I may feel about capital, that's the game. That's what we're in, right? So while one foot is on something better, where we talked about can't be chasing growth, we can't be chasing all these things at the neglect of social good, we also need to have a conversation about, I want to take your ethic, I want to take your belonging, I want to take your feeling of we have to do service, and I need to match that with how we're going to do other things, because capital, because jobs, because ownership, those are things that are vital. The financial and economic health are important. And so I talk to them about running for office. I talk to them about constitutions can be amended. Amend one if you don't like the one that exists, right? I talk about new types of jobs, new types of careers. Have that conversation with the next young person you meet, right? And they may not want to hear it, but a great story, and this is the last one. When I was at United Bronx Parents in the kindergarten, they made us recite and learn Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Whatever you may feel about that speech. They made us memorize it. And it sounds kind of crazy that 5-6-year-olds memorizing Dr. King's speech. And more crazy is that at the time, I probably could do the second half of it. Now, right? But I don't think it's any coincidence that even though it didn't reflect on me, or I didn't really remember it until a few days ago, I'm teaching African American history. Right? I'm teaching at a community college. Right? That we're a part of a tradition. Right? I don't think, though, that we're meeting on Martin Luther King Day weekend that I got the opportunity to speak to you all. That's not happenstance. Right? And not only is that not happenstance, that's because somebody put that seed in there. Right? And that seed actualizes. So we have to have a different type of watering and a different type of seeds. A seed that doesn't say, subways, chains is economic development. A seed that says Dunkin' Donuts is not economic development. It's not creating jobs. A seed that says casinos, because that's the next front. Right? You see how that bouncing ball works? First it was retail, Then it was big box. Then it was chains. Now it's casinos. Look at by JFK. Right? Look at Yonkers. Look at upstate New York. Look at even online gambling. Right? That's the next frontier. It's not just casinos. Right? That's not economic. We need a new seed. So all of us have a responsibility. Let's pick this thing up. Let's keep picking it up. Excuse me, because we're doing it, right? Let's continue to move it forward. But also, we got to build each other up. There needs to be a different way of seeing this thing. And that's perhaps the hardest part. But we got to see this thing different, along with acting on what we've been doing right all along.
Thank you.
I just want to piggyback on what you mentioned. You mentioned exactly what I wanted to talk about, in particular, WEDCO, as a development corporation, is a fascinating corporation because they came to the neighborhood. They have a lot where they're going to be developing a building that's going to have the Bronx Musical Heritage Center. But they didn't just come to the community and say, we're going to build this. They've actually had sessions with people in Melrose. They've actually had, they've engaged the community. They have had surveys. They've released the data on the surveys. They break out the community, people, the members who attend these meetings into working groups to continue the conversation of what they want. So here we have a developer that actually is coming in and is going to build something, but it's not what they necessarily want to build. It's engaging the community, and I think we need to support more of those types of developments, and not just a developer who's just going to come in and put whatever they want. Right now, I'm trying to apply pressure on. I don't know if you're familiar with La Central development, which is happening just 2 blocks away. It's going to be 985 apartments in 5 buildings and 40,000 square foot YMCA. Under the Bloomberg administration, he pushed that particular site should be as good, if not better, than Via Verde. And Via Verde was unique because it combined rentals and cooperative units. In this particular development, we have 985 units of housing that's just strictly going to be rental. And again, it goes back to the question of ownership. Why are we going to have such a huge development without one single ownership component to it, even if it's affordable housing? So, we have to really engage, just get in the ear of the developers, even if they're not like WEDCO, but, you can, with enough pressure, you can, eventually get your voice heard and maybe change the conversation. Might turn out to be, 50 apartments might be, co-ops or condos for affordable, that are affordable. But, something, and it's a start, and I think that's what we need to do.
Your community board, economic and land use development committee is where they bring every single one of these projects have to come there for their blessing. That is the one place where this type of concept can be put forward, asking and challenging these developers, what did you do to gauge community input? What did you do to solicit community thoughts and ideas? That's the one place where the machine makes it all come together. But if we don't have time, we don't make it a priority.
But not when plans or soft sketches are developed.
Right. But you challenge it. You can at least challenge it there when you have a situation where you don't have, developers that are doing it right, and insist upon that as part of the matrix.
To add to what you just said, when the developer actually came to the community board, because I will say, and this could be on the record, CB1 is probably the most corrupt board in all of New York City. It is disgusting. You guys got lucky. You guys got lucky because you just booted your district meeting.
Right on.
We need to do.
Right on.
Which was when I was at this community board meeting for just that, for that developer, I was told to shut up by the district manager. He was like, this is not a Q&A session. I said, no, this is a public forum. I'm here to talk. And I kept on talking, and I kept badgering the developer. I'm like, it's just rental. We need a home ownership component into this. This is way too large of a project. And our community board, you're right. That's where the power is. But unfortunately, our community board, the way it's selected, it's by one, the councilwoman, who we already know her track record here, and 2, our borough president. So we have 2 people who, I don't want to use the word corrupt, but their track record speaks for itself when of the people who they're pandering to. So, that's another place where we have to, like you said, go to the community boards and really apply the pressure. Be that rabble rouser in there. Be that thorn in their side in the community board, because the community boards also at the same time they don't really have much power anyway. But
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, they don't have.
Right.
I mean, it's an advisory.
It's procedural.
It's all
part of the procedure.
Create enough ruckus.
Right.
Right, and also we can also advocate to have the community board have more power.
Exactly.
Than it does now.
Yeah.
So.
And be independent from being a selective process to maybe being held accountable. I encourage everyone to, we have a fabulous housing model called amalgamated housing. I don't know how many of you are familiar with amalgamated. It was built in the late 20s by the Jewish Workers Cooperative, and they pooled their resources and created what was called limited equity co-ops, where they can't sell at the market rate, so it preserves affordability indefinitely. There's a 5-year waiting list to get into these spaces. If you go look, absolutely beautiful, well-maintained. Just it was the precursor to Co-op City. But again, think about these models, investigate them, and encourage that these are the types of developments that are brought into your community and preserve so that the opportunity you had to own gets passed on to someone else who may not be making the amount of income down the line. So again, it's called amalgamated housing.
And it started right here in the Bronx.
Right here in the Bronx, right by Sedgwick Avenue.
Almost 100 years ago.
So,
Most of the innovation has come out of the Bronx. So,
yeah.
And
Culture of innovation.
We're going to open the floor up for Q&A. So,
Hi, my name is Sonia Gonzalez Martinez. I live by Yankee Stadium. I've been a lifelong resident of the Bronx and Washington Heights, and I'm really appreciative that the Bronx Documentary Collective is having this space. Because to be honest, when you guys first came to this space, I regarded it a little suspiciously. Because like Kelly said, we were just talking about this, that, you know, when you grow up in a certain neighborhood, when nice things come to the neighborhood, you know that they're not for you. Mm-hmm. So then you start to regard it suspiciously, and you start to feel like, so I'm glad that you're having this discussion here. Right before I came in here, when at 4 o'clock, African-American gentleman was walking by, and he said, "What's going on in there?" And I said, "It's a gentrification discussion, and, you know, we're having this, you know, this panel, and you should come in, and blah, blah, blah." Because I've seen this space, but I don't necessarily, the people that are gentrifying the neighborhood are already in there. You know what I mean? So he says that it's not necessarily a space that I feel welcome by. You know what I mean? And I heard that. You know what I mean? I thought that was really interesting. But this space is providing this dialogue, which is super interesting. And I think that that kind of speaks to what I want to ask Kelly about, which is, even though there is this infrastructural problem that we as a community, new and old Bronx residents, need to kind of tackle, there is the racial aspect that, you know, whether if somebody sees a white person in the neighborhood or a black, it used to be the phrase, "there goes the neighborhood." You know what I mean? Like when I see white people in the neighborhood, I get a little nervous. You know, I'm like, oh, goddamn, I have a year maybe left in this neighborhood. And I don't want to regard that, and I don't want to feel hostile or resentful. You know what I mean? So what are some of the discussions that you found in making this film racially? You know what I mean? In ways that we can kind of have a dialogue that's not adversarial, that focuses on the real problem.
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
Well, there's so many things to say, you know, like, I mean, I felt very uncomfortable living in Fort Greene during those years, you know, because I knew that even though it wasn't my fault what was happening, my presence there made it more appealing to all these real estate developers, you know, so the question of what you do with that is really hard, you know. I mean, I know what you don't do, which is ignore all the people of color in the neighborhood who were there before you, because I've had a lot of conversations with people who say that people of color in Brooklyn who say that that's exactly what happens, that people don't talk to them, they look at them like, you know, what are you doing here? You know, you're an obstacle to the neighborhood getting better, you know, all these kinds of things, or just don't talk at all. So, I mean, there's kind of like the personal level. To me, the only way to really... See, it's really hard because, like, for example, I didn't have it in me to move to Bedford-Stuyvesant when I moved out of Fort Greene, and even though I know it's not my fault and it's not my problem, and it's not there was a feeling that I just didn't want to be part of that change there. So where I'm living now, it's like the community's not been rooted there very long. It's like in Sunset Park, it's like, the Puerto Ricans are kind of displaced by the Mexicans who are there, and then the Chinese are, they're coming and they're buying property, so they're probably not going to get displaced anywhere. And, it's not like the dynamics aren't real, but it's not as heavy for me. So I do have to say, like, I personally felt a weight off me when I left that part of Brooklyn, because it was so, knowing all of that history that I knew, it was just really hard for me to be there as a white person moving into the neighborhood. So even though there's all these politics, and I know everything in the film about it's corporations and it's not individuals and everything is true, I also feel like, that it's just really deep, the racial stuff. And to me, the only thing you can do about it is, try to be politically engaged in a cross-racial, cross-class way. And that's healing, and for everybody. And just try to, be on the right side of things. Like in Sunset Park, I'm on all these parents groups, which might as well be white parents. It's like, there are these internet groups of Sunset Park parents, right? And like people will start saying things like, well, can't we get these vendors out of the park, and they're selling all this plastic crap, and, they leave litter, so we should get rid of the vendors in the park, So, and someone's like, well, we should just call the police and get them to enforce the ban on street vendors. And, so in those moments, like, it's worth it to stand up and say, no, we're not going to call the cops on a bunch of people who might be undocumented and who are going to get harassed. And you know what I mean? Like, I think you just try to do the right thing in those moments. But I think it's really hard, and I guess it's just about, one, not being afraid to challenge other white people on it, because that happens all the time. People say incredibly offensive things, like in the farmers markets. Yeah. I mean, I knew all those people. They were talking to me because they felt comfortable talking to me like that, I mean, they're not that friendly with me now. I don't know. I think it's really hard, and I guess it's just about owning it and talking about it. I don't know what else to really do, and try to be more part of the solution than a problem.
And I just wanted to quickly, your first part of your statement about the Bronx Documentary Center. I want, like anybody who doesn't know the history about the BDC, first of all, I'm also a volunteer here. When Mike opened up the space, before he opened up the space, he opened it up to the community to discuss what we want to see going on here. And just by a quick show of hands, where's my BDC family? Can you all stand up for a second? So basically, this is the face of the BDC. The BDC is actually the face of the community. It is very reflective of who lives here. And a lot of my fellow friends and people and photographers that have come together, what was interesting, what the BDC actually ended up doing was quite phenomenal, is that it connected all these photographers that live within blocks of each other that never knew each other. So, just to point that out, like, you may have had one individual who, felt that he's not welcome here, but all the events that the BDC does, has always been sort of, with the community involved, free portraits for the families on holidays, and they just come right in off the streets. And, they do sometimes have that trepidation at first because, you see something like this, but, the reality is it's quite the opposite. But I'm glad you made that, because it is one of those things that you see in a neighborhood and you panic at first,
There's a central theme, though, that you were talking about and that sort of runs through your question. We've got to have difficult conversations respectfully. They're difficult. We know that. You're going to be uncomfortable. We know that. I'm going to say some things that you're not going to agree with. You're going to say some things that I don't agree with. But we have to be able to be mature enough. And, the internet assassins, keyboard assassins, they can do whatever they want from their bedroom or from their kitchen, say whatever they want, because they don't have to look anybody in the eye, all right? They're anonymous. They with them hashtags and all of the nonsense. But those of us who want to be responsible and accountable to the future of our community and who want to be responsible and accountable to building community, we got to be able to have difficult conversations respectfully. Okay, the Brooklyn anecdote, one of the ladies, they asked one of the senior ladies that's been around the Bed-Stuy neighborhood sort of, about this gentrification question, and she brought up the fact that it's not so much that we don't mind new neighbors, we want them to be neighborly. Don't come in and call the cops when every year we sit here in the summertime and we talk to each other and our neighbors, but now all of a sudden, We're making too much noise for you? You're not respecting the community that you came into. You know, you've decided that your discomfort outweighs the community's legacy and the community's traditions and the community's mores and practices. And that's what I'm talking about when I say we've got to have difficult conversations respectfully. And that goes a long way. It goes a long way.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank the panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules to come here. And I have a question for, if hopefully the panelists can answer this together. Given that the Department of City Planning is proposing to redevelop the 73-block corridor along Jerome Avenue to Cromwell Jerome, similar to the Fulton Mall controversy, where they want to turn the residential and auto shops into a big residential, with luxury condo units. And given that it also leaked and started with somebody inside CB7, and given that along Kingsbridge Road, there are plans by the mayor and Ruben Diaz Jr. to turn the Kingsbridge Armory into the world's biggest ice skating center. And also given that any time that a neighborhood is under attack by real estate interests, there's a notable amount of increased police presence that harass youth of color, make them feel unwanted in their own neighborhood, and also, serve to set up cameras, surveillance cameras all of a sudden that didn't used to be there, and patrol halls and Operation Clean Halls and all of that. I wanted to know, is there a way, like in all of your experiences, what do you recommend for organizers and activists living in the Bronx what can you recommend for them, and how can they educate youth of color that are, especially black men, that are under attack by stop and frisk and Branton's policies, including broken windows, to make the connection between gentrification and police brutality each time that a neighborhood is in danger of being redeveloped?
Practically speaking, block by block, building by building, corner by corner, you bring in the information that the community needs to know. Broader, you once you do that step, then you engage them. See, it doesn't stop with just this. See, one of the things that I always worry about in these settings is that if we don't continue, if two people don't connect after today who weren't connected before they walked in, if 5 folks don't join something together and create something that continues in inertia, if we don't change this, what we're feeling now, this feeling of anger, frustration, all those other things, if we don't turn that into action, real meaningful action, then we're talking for talking's sake. So I say that prefacing what I'm going to say next, which was block by block, corner by corner, educate, agitate, but then organize. If you don't do the organizing piece, you've wasted your time. So it's got to be, yes, inform the kids. Get the right people in front of them to tell them their rights. Get them the right information that lets them know what's going on. Draw the dots. Connect the dots between, that wasn't there 6 months ago. Guess what they decided in community board last month? Draw the dots for them so they get to see that it is necessary for them to engage in the organizing. We don't get anything changed by standing on the corner complaining to each other. We've got to take it from that frustration to agitation and organization, or else we don't do anybody any service.
So to answer your question about the Cromwell Jerome situation, on the second walking tour that city planning gave, it was shut down because people were really upset at it, particularly, first of all, because it was called Cromwell Jerome, and everybody saw that as a rebranding of a neighborhood. But what I will say about Cromwell Jerome study area, unlike different rezonings or proposed rezonings, under Bloomberg we used to get, this is what is here now, and this is what we're proposing. Cromwell Jerome actually, well, as far as we're being presented, it's being shown just as a clean slate. This is the area we're studying. They haven't proposed any new buildings, any new zonings for particular lots. It's a proposed zoning, so it's a little different than previous. I'm not going to say that it's a good thing necessarily, but it's definitely a departure from the Bloomberg era when we were just shown before and after. This is what you're going to have after, and people would get in the room and complain, and they'll change it ever so slightly. So keep your eye on Cromwell Jerome and keep the pressure on city planning, because they claim that it's coming from the ground up, but the only ground up is, like you said, it was presented by the community boards, and we already know what the community boards are attached to.
That's kind of amazing, though. Do they have any kind of process for developing what the zoning is going to be there?
I've spoken to the head, not the head, but the borough head, actually, and they swear up and down that there is nothing on paper as far as what the zonings is going to be. They actually continue to tell me that this is really a truly, like, they want to engage the community as it goes further. They want the community to basically help shape it. I don't know how much of it is true. Again,
Wow.
considering you're 12 years of Bloomberg, you're traumatized by that. So, but this is a new administration, and like, I do know someone there who I feel like I can trust, and swears up and down that this is from the ground up, even though it did come from the community board, that they don't want to do anything without the community stakeholders, the renters, the auto mechanic shops that are there, because that was the big issue, that these mechanics are going to be played, because they're being called into blight on the community is what they were, the way it was presented, that all these auto body shops on Jerome Avenue, kind of like over in Queens.
Blight for who?
Yeah, blight for who, exactly. So, like, that's the conversation.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we don't know if it's true. If maybe they have something sneaky, and they already have the plan.
Right.
But for the first time,
I'd be very suspicious.
Look over here, look over here, look over here.
so I'm glad you brought up Cromwell Jerome. Keep your eye on it. Keep again, like Anthony said, keep organizing. Have that community organized very, very strongly, and be very suspicious of everything. But as it stands right now, it's a clean slate. There's no, after picture, after vision, complete yet.
Let me just really briefly, because you asked about policing and gentrification, right?
Yeah.
We haven't got to that part of the conversation. When you don't own, you're forced in a position of reaction and persuasion, right? That's what you got to do when you don't own something. When you don't own something, you have to persuade somebody to do it differently, right? And you're always forced to react to what other people are doing, right? And particularly with policing, this is what we're seeing, right? With policing, we're seeing that we're always forced to react, and that we're always forced to persuade them to do something better, right? And the entire policing apparatus. I mean, there's a larger conversation in criminal justice, right? From how we go to courts, to how decisions are made by judges, by grand juries, to how investigations take place, right? There's a whole conversation about that, and that needs to be a part of making community policing a real thing, not just a plan. And if that means we got to show up every day at every police precinct, because we're not in an ownership position right now, right? So if that means we got to show up at these police precincts, if that means we got to demand to speak to someone, if that means we have to be there every day until community-based policing is a real thing, we are in the unfortunate position that that's the way it's going to be, right? But when Eric Garner, right, when that decision happened, Washington Square Park, going up and down Fifth Avenue, all of those are important things, but we needed to be in front of one police plaza every single day, right? We needed to be in front of one police plaza every single day. And I say that because that is the hub of the issue, right? Fifth Avenue was a part of the issue for sure, and Washington Square Park and walking up and down. Yeah, but one police plaza was the problem.
And Mike,
Ray Kelly was the problem. Is, right? That's the problem. So, Bratton, all of them. and then they hop around from LA to private to, then Giuliani popped back on TV. It becomes like a maze of them. Sorry. Bratton, right? So I think we're going to really have to be serious. I think you have to mobilize our activist part, which is really kind of the most organically happening thing right now, is that a lot of people are worked up around Black Lives Matter, around Ferguson, around, policing, and also tie that into the Dreamers, right? Because the Dreamers are ultimately, right, some of the people that are facing that stop and frisk logic, right? That logic of who are you? What you doing here? You don't belong here. Where's your papers? Prove to me that you belong in this place. That logic went from Black and Latino men in particular communities to, after 9/11, right, people from a particular place, from a particular religious background, to now it's people of a suspicious kind of identity about, do you really belong here? That logic never goes away. I think schools are important to teach our folks. Schools, wherever they may exist, right? Education, to teach our folks that logic keeps going. How are you going to break that down? Right? And that goes to the conversation that we were talking about, getting to know one another and really having those real conversations. But to do the policing aspect of it, I unfortunately see no choice but to be there every day and to mobilize that activist part, to be there. How it ties to gentrification, for me, that's an intellectual thing, right? We got to see that the logic of removal, the logic of we can force you to do whatever we want you to do, and the logic of you can be easily rendered suspicious has never gone away. It's almost like a runaway slave kind of thing, right? That logic ain't never leave this country, just like ownership logic has never left. You can say that's how capitalism works, perhaps, right? So we got to get hip to the game, man. We have to, again, be smarter to know that this is what they're doing. They're creating a story to make it easier to remove you. And then we have to have the direct action. Until we get that story where we want it to be, I'm going to be here every day. You can't beat up my people. So cop watch.
Right. And going back to what Michael's saying about organizing, there is an organization called Bronx for NYPD Accountability. And every week there is a community council meeting at every precinct. They all go, so you should visit them on Facebook if you want to be involved, and they're putting pressure about community policing. And it was 18 and 20-year-olds that went and found out about this walking tour in the Jerome section and actually disrupted the whole walking tour and put people on alert to let them know that they want to know what is going on in their neighborhood. So it is happening. And it's Jay Epsy. If you look him up on Facebook, he's part of Lehman.
E-S-P-Y.
Yeah, SB. He's part of Lehman College. There's a movement coming out of there.
I just want to offer a free resource. So in 2004, I made a film with Tammy Gold called Every Mother's Son. It was on the series POV, and it gives a lot of background on the policing issue. It starts with Anthony Baez, who was killed here, and it deals with a lot of broken windows and stop and frisk, and it's the story of three mothers who lost kids, including Diallo. And if you remember, after Diallo, there were 1,200 people down at one police plaza for day after day after day. So especially like with this new crop of activism, it's good for giving people history. It's streaming free on the POV site, pov.org, until like May or something. So.
Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I am a member of Melrose Community, and also I work in affordable housing development on the community side. I've worked at Nos Quedamos, I've worked at Ford and Bedford Housing Corporation, and now I'm doing affordable housing development in Bushwick, Brooklyn. So I'm just wondering what your opinion is about private developers coming in to the Bronx saying that they're going to develop affordable housing. Do you believe that they're going to develop affordable housing, and what do you think that their takeout is going to be from affordable housing development?
Well, the issue of affordable housing is that it's affordable. You know, who is it affordable for? You know, in community right here in Community District, Community Board 1, when they built, you know, in Melrose, all the affordable housing units that were built. You know, like you said, they weren't filled by mostly, you know, our people because in our communities because they didn't meet the income requirements. So, you know, they can say that they can label it affordable housing, and it can be, you know, affordable housing by the book, you know, as it goes by, you know, by the regulations. But is it really, you know, that's the real question is it really affordable?
That's, to me, is the next policy frontier as far as affordable housing is concerned, because this, you know this, Stephanie, the calculation that they use to create that index number, the average median income, you know, it's not countywide, it's citywide. So the math that they use to determine what's affordable here in the Bronx includes the income from Bronxdale and every other, you know, Upper Manhattan, which skews the whole number. Every countless days, we have to tell folks from the lists that we have at Nos Quedamos what we know are open and, you know, applications are going in. We have to ask folks, okay, well, here are the income requirements, here are the maximums, and the problem is that the real squeeze is the maximums tend to be too low for real folk who come home from college and get a halfway decent job and they want to look for a decent place to live in their community. They may make just too much that they don't qualify for it. And then the lower end is at such a place where, because it's been pushed up by that math, it doesn't make it viable for working class folks who are doing hourly wage jobs, trying to keep their family together and put food on the table. So the math is where the politics is really struggling. Because sure, they can come in and do it according to the math, but in the end, most of us, I can't afford it, because I make just a little bit too much. And then the folks that I know who, didn't have the blessings that I have, they don't make enough. So you still have this housing that is being built for folks who come from economics outside of your community. It's the politics of the math that we really have to look at.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sim Silva. I'm a Bronx native and artist, and I just became an official not-for-profit for a public arts organization in New York State. I have an interesting question. I heard Ed talk about the new Bronx issue. I'm a little bit over 40, and I remember the old Bronx. Okay, so coming from that upbringing, I remember the way I used to appreciate the art that I used to see growing up. Recently, I've been following, a lot of social medias, and there are a lot of artists, not only in the Bronx, but in a lot of the boroughs, that are also sharing concerns about being displaced as local artists via gentrification in their community. So, not once am I hearing what's being done to support local artists, throughout the 5 boroughs. And to me, that's a major concern. I myself, for about 3 years, have donated, featured over 40 artists, over 50 murals, maybe a good 85-90% being within the Bronx within the last year and a half. And what I've come to know is that it brings community together. It gives people a sense of pride and ownership. It helps people want to maintain, dispel the broken glass theory and that the Bronx is still burning, because it no longer is, obviously, because we've been putting a lot of money into infrastructure. So what's being done, or, maybe, this is how I want to play an active role in making a difference in my community. I took out a personal loan to found my non-for-profit because I wanted to put my money where my mouth is. Now, how do I get in at the ground level with organizations like you? Maybe you could give me advice on how to reach out to people. The Bronx is a multicultural community, and we all know, especially with you said, we have to take, play active roles to make a difference, right? We all know how much art has always played an active role in letting the people's voices in the community be heard. So how can art play a role in making a difference in the community? Are murals being secured for artists, local artists from the community, to be able to show this is what my community is about, and we're putting up this artwork because we're proud of where we're from. So can anybody answer that question and give me advice?
I would definitely say connect with, it's a new organization that's starting. I don't know if you've heard about them, the Bronx Artist Factory, the BX Artist Factory. And they're going to be an incubator for artists in the Bronx. And its big focus is obviously artists in the Bronx, big focus on minority artists. So I definitely, connect with them. They're scheduled to launch, I think, next month or in March, officially as a collective, and they'll be more than likely in touch with a lot of organizations that can probably help you, navigate that better.
Time for 2 more questions, and then we have to wrap up. Hi.
I'm sorry, of course the phone wants the conversation now. Bronx born and bred, lovely. However, it sounds like we need to take action after I organize because it will happen, and I agitate, I do that every day, then what? And then when I do organize, and I go into my friends' communities and help them organize, where can we find all the resources that all of you have been bringing up at this point so that we can say, oh, or can we have another conference, an action-oriented conference, so that we can, in fact, be educated on what we can do? Because I know that I'll be sure to do it myself, but I want to make sure that all my neighbors know that these options are there, that there is, in fact, a power that they own, because I'm all about the people power. So, yes, what is next, and can it be grander?
Well, I would just say that one of the problems with this issue is it's so local that there's always this feeling like, well, how do we connect with everybody else and all the information they have? So we did a little bit of that in this facilitation guide, study guide that we're doing. So that's downloadable from mybrooklynmovie.com. So it just has resources, and it's being super updated. So like it's better to do it in like a couple weeks than now, but there is one on there now. There's also Right to the City Alliance is an alliance of organizations. It's national. There's a number of groups that belong to it here in New York City, like Fury and other groups, and so they're good. They have resources there too, so they're a good place to tap into.
Because I'm also talking about workshops being led by you, sir, and you, sir, and you,
And
sir.
that's readily available. We should talk after, because depending on where you are, I'm sure each of us knows an organization in one part of the Bronx or another that we could plug you into. So let's just talk afterwards. I think that's important.
Oh, wow.
I just wanted to quickly add to the point about civic engagement. The community board deadline in the Bronx is February 6th. And I don't know if anyone in this room knows, but the age was reduced to 16 years old so you can be a community board member. I'm a community board member up in Bedford, and I encourage everybody to join their community boards because we desperately need your viewpoints and your insights on these issues. So I just wanted to encourage everybody to download the application tonight when you get home and apply, and tell every young person that you know to also do the same. Thank you.
Well, the last question, I'm sorry, guys.
You can stay on and talk informally after.
Right. Yep.
Not close to that.
Just one more, and then we can break and you can ask up front the questions.
Okay. I'm trying to connect some of the dots in my mind, and I'm trying to see from the other side of the spectrum. What is the motivating factor for the politicians to approve all these things? Are they looking at lobbying as a legacy issue? Are they making side deals? Because
All
they
of
know
the
the
above.
stuff doesn't
All
make
of the
sense. In that lady you interviewed, you could tell she was lying.
Yeah.
So she knows it doesn't make sense.
Well, she's not elected, so her job is to lie, basically.
The objective for them is to stay in office, and then if they get voted out of office, to have a tie to the private sector so they can keep making money.
Okay.
They do get a lot of campaign
pretty
money
simple.
from developers. That's one thing. And also, some of them just drink the Kool-Aid about jobs. Like, a lot of them feel like if you promise jobs are coming to the district, they'll just vote for it, you know?
And that's what's happened here in the Bronx with our borough president. You know, last year, how many malls did we have opening in the Bronx? We had 4 malls opening in the Bronx, and he's touting job creation, but these are all low-wage jobs. And, you know, he has political aspirations, so that's why, you know, it's beyond the Bronx. You know, he wants to be, you know, he wants to run for mayor. That's not a secret. And so for him to be able to say, hey, look what I did to the Bronx. I cleaned up the Bronx. Right. You know, I made it into the new Bronx. Right. That's his motivation right there.
For example, you know the development on Sheridan, Pinnacle, by the new Ward of the Bronx, the park over there. That's being spearheaded by the former speaker of the city council.
Okay.
Not Quinn, Griffin.
Okay.
So it gives you an idea.
Okay.
So.
The other reason is they never hear from us that we don't like it.
Right.
They really don't. So, you know, if you're upset with something they did, call them up and tell them, you know?
So thank you very much.